Thank you to the patrons for supporting the channel.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, as voted on by my patrons, we're taking a look at Marble Hornets. Marble Hornets is one of the most popular horror web series of all time, has inspired countless analog horror and web series of today, and, in my opinion, elevated the realm of found footage as a format above what it was before and what a lot of things still are trying really hard to beat. So with that in mind, let's get started.
I've talked at length before about the origins of the Slender Man character, but I've got a lot of new viewers recently. Still, I won't spend too much time talking about it here. The concept was created by Victor Surge, a member of the Something Awful forums in 2009. Posted in a thread about photoshopping paranormal and spooky images, Victor Surge's character of the Slender Man quickly caught the attention of users. There was something about the images, the character, and the bits of lore Surge had written that really captivated people. Fog rolled in, 3 p.m. it appeared. 3:27, Mark and Evan went outside. Couldn't cover them, fog too thick. Screams and sounds like a baby laughing, but deeper. It's out in the fog. We may be a little out of town, but someone will come. The rest of us can't sleep. No food, no power. What does it want? Steinman Woods. Both subjects were hunting in the Steinman Woods 4 hours before sundown. Surviving subject states that while hunting, both men grew uneasy as fog levels rapidly increased. A constant murmuring sound accompanied by a low hum eventually became apparent to the two men an hour after the fog increased. An object falling out of a tree struck one of the men in the left shoulder, causing him to discharge his weapon. Object said to be the body of a man of unknown age. It was very precisely dissected, with major internal organs still contained within the rib cage in what looked like clear bags. Surviving subject placed organ bag within backpack. Attack followed several minutes later after a low children's laugh, like a giggle. Surviving subject ran until he reached his vehicle. Subject then drove to assumed safety. Backpack destroyed. Surviving subject is classified as a B7 witness. B7 witness to be placed in quarantine blind box until resolution. And it goes and goes, weaving an almost SCP-esque tale of the Slender Man. What you might notice about these, though, is that it doesn't quite sound the same as what you might typically associate with Slender Man nowadays. What's all this about mutilation and such? Where's the camera distortion, the pages, the proxies? Well, none of that actually started with Victor Surge's original post. You can credit much of Slender Man's modern lore to that of the Marble Hornets series. One summer evening in 2009, film student Troy Wagner stumbles across a Slender Man post on the Something Awful forums. They were quite new, and not much existed outside of these images and a few fan-made additions. Nothing had been done with video yet. The next few months for Troy looked to be fairly boring at this point, after being unable to find a summer job. So, seizing the opportunity to do something with the summer months, Troy calls up Joseph Delage. Over the course of 9 hours one night, Joseph and Troy write the entire story of Season 1 on note cards, literally mix them up, and tell the story in that order. The name Marble Hornets came while Troy was driving, not wanting to settle for something like the Slender Tapes. So Troy decided the next two things he saw would be the name for this new project. An ad for marble installation, and then an ad for Hornet extermination. And there you go, Marble Hornets. Now, before we go straight into talk about the plot, I want to point something out. There has been considerable debate about what Marble Hornets actually is. Specifically, is it an ARG? And to actually understand how to watch and engage with Marble Hornets, it's a pretty important question. ARG stands for Alternate Reality Game. It's essentially an interactive game or series of puzzles that a player must solve or interact with in order for the story to progress. Proto-ARGs include books like The Secret and Masquerade, which led to treasure hunts, some of which are still unsolved. The format's heavy hitters started with mostly big companies using it to generate hype for a more traditional medium. The Why So Serious ARG took place leading up to the release of The Dark Knight. Films like Cloverfield and AI and game series like Halo have all had pretty intensive ARG experiences as a way to advertise for other mediums that were more traditional. But many modern ARG projects exist entirely for themselves. The final product is the game, the experience of the players, the story being told. But while Marble Hornets is often thrown in with ARGs, it doesn't quite fit that definition. While Marble Hornets is filled with codes and secrets, the narrative is completely unaffected by whether or not the players interact with these codes. So while it is partially interactive, it's not really an ARG, and plenty of other online series fall into the same predicament as Marble Hornets. The name that started going around a little more recently is unfiction. If you want a deeper dive into this, watch Nightmind's video about the term. In fact, check out Nightmind's channel in general. The videos Nick Nocturne has made about unfiction, ARGs, and even Marble Hornets specifically have been a huge help to me in understanding how to tackle this series, and an inspiration for my channel in general. But for the basic gist, what is unfiction? I have a couple different definitions I've found, but they all get the same point across. From shcpemerald.org, unfiction is an umbrella term that refers to a large range of artistic works that all share a common theme. They exist in their own fictional worlds as if they belong in reality. In other words, unfiction pretends to be telling a real story even though it is fictional. So basically, unfiction is media that exists within its own world, if you get what I mean. Even something in a slightly more traditional medium like the movie Blair Witch could be argued to be unfiction, especially with its commitment to believability, with missing persons posters, and the website, and the fake documentary being made about the Blair Witch legend. And in fact, it's pretty clear that Marble Hornets takes a lot of inspiration from Blair Witch in a lot of aspects.
After a simple post on the Something Awful thread, the first video would be uploaded, titled Introduction, that sets up the premise.
Marble Hornets was a student film being created by Alex Crayley with the help of a few others, including Jay. After more and more issues with production and Alex becoming more irritable on set,
"You brought your dog!"
the film was cancelled. Alex planned on burning the tapes from the production, but Jay, the one behind the Marble Hornets channel, convinced him to hand them over. Alex moved away, and Jay forgot about it until very recently. He begins uploading what he finds on the tapes, along with brief commentary in the form of text, before or after the footage. However, Jay soon begins to find strange things on these tapes. And that's where the series kicks off from. Now, as much as I'd like to analyze each of Marble Hornets' 87 entries one by one, that sort of writing is soul-crushing and boring. And if you want to see in detail every single event that happens in the series, well, you could just watch the whole series yourself. Or if you wanted a little more in-depth analysis about each individual entry, you could watch Nightmind's videos. They were extremely helpful to me while writing and researching this video. So for this analysis, I'm going to be taking the series in chunks and pointing out what specific details in certain entries are important. Some details might be slightly out of order just to make it easier to explain. This is still going to be pretty comprehensive, but a little less time-consuming. Also, this series is over 9 hours of cryptic codes and shaky forest camera. I fully expect to at least make some minor mistakes when doing this, so if you notice them, please point them out. I'll probably keep an addendum/corrections list in the pinned comment, sort of like how I did with Petscop. So, let's start with Season 1. The first few entries Jay uploads begin to show Alex's deterioration while working on Marble Hornets. He's constantly filming himself, and he seems paranoid. And this paranoia doesn't seem unfounded. Someone seems to be following him, what you might call Slenderman, but this series calls the Operator. And to be fair, while inspired by Slenderman, the Operator is a different entity. The entries also show strange audio and video distortions on many of these tapes, from visual tearing to ear-destroying static. As a side note, I think these first few entries are actually some of the most effective. They give the same vibe as all those classic old spooky internet videos that were clearly hoaxes, but something about the low quality and vibe they had actually made them scary. They may be short, but they're effective. We're also introduced to some of the actors working on Marble Hornets, Tim and Brian. It's worth noting that in a lot of these tapes showing the behind the scenes, people show signs of being sick or cold, but especially Tim, who even takes medication for his sickness. Meanwhile, on Jay's Twitter, we can see that Jay seems to start obsessing about watching through these tapes. And pretty early on, a different channel becomes involved, To The Arc. Back in the days of video responses on YouTube, To The Arc would respond to entries Jay uploads with cryptic messages and codes. Now, I won't be talking about all of the To The Arc videos, but I will be touching on things important to the story. In a response to entry 10, a tape Jay has uploaded in which he notes that the audio is missing, To The Arc uploads Operator, which contains the missing audio from the tape. This signals to me immediately that whoever To The Arc is had access to these tapes at some point, or was either close with Alex or someone else who worked on Marble Hornets. And this is further enforced after entry 13. Entry 13 shows Jay helping Alex during the production of Marble Hornets, and To The Arc responds with Exit, which shows the very same day being recorded from a different angle, like someone was spying on them. So again, whoever To The Arc is, they have a connection to the production of Marble Hornets, and knew something was going on before Jay ever started the Marble Hornets channel. One final thing I'll note is later on in the season, some of the wording of the To The Arc videos seems to suggest there is more than one person behind To The Arc, up to 3 or more. So keep that in mind about To The Arc. Jay's obsession worsens into sickness and fatigue as he continues watching and uploading Alex's tapes. Entry 14 shows Alex bleeding mysteriously from the head after the Operator appears in his bedroom. What's interesting about this, however, is that in To The Arc's response, it contains the message "bleed more." This begins to hint more at what's going on behind the To The Arc channel. Whoever it is has something against Alex. Entry 15 breaks the pattern of just uploading Alex's old tapes. This time, Jay in the present is going to interview Tim, one of the actors on Marble Hornets that I mentioned earlier, under the guise of Jay wanting to finish Marble Hornets. He doesn't get too much information out of this, but Jay's own investigative work continues in entry 16. He has received information as to where Brian, one of the other actors involved in Marble Hornets, is located. When Jay shows up to the house, he finds it abandoned, unlocked, appearing as if some sort of struggle ensued. He finds a bullet casing, a bottle of pills, and some drawings that Alex had been making in previous tapes. You know, the slender ones. Jay has a coughing fit and leaves, and To The Arc responds with a video showing that Jay wasn't alone. To The Arc was there, filming from the dark. To The Arc is actively stalking Jay. Entry 17 shows more footage of Jay, Tim, and Alex working on Marble Hornets, with the Operator nearby. However, Jay doesn't seem to remember this happening at all, and the memory issues continue when Jay decides to go back to Brian's abandoned house. While there, he's attacked by this strange man in a mask, who has been unofficially named Masky by the community. Jay wakes up the next day in his car with no memory of the previous night. This masked figure begins showing up in To The Arc's videos, revealing that Masky is at least one of the people behind To The Arc. Masky's involvement continues, as Jay reveals that he has begun filming himself, much like Alex did. One of these tapes shows that Masky broke into his house and watched him sleep. Jay's next move is to investigate the tower, as prompted by a message he found on one of Alex's notes. The tower is an old filming location of Marble Hornets, and when there, Jay finds another tape that shows Alex leading Seth, the Marble Hornets cameraman, around an abandoned building before they're both attacked by the Operator. Alex then films himself after getting away, explaining that Seth is gone and he needs to burn the tapes. Trying one last time to find something useful at Brian's house, Jay encounters Masky again. Attempting to chase him down, Jay ends up being teleported in a very cool sequence around the house, until finally he's teleported to the abandoned building that Seth went missing in. He's attacked by the Operator and wakes up the next day in his house, again with no memory of the previous night. For Jay, this is the last straw. He decides that this investigation is too risky and that he's quitting. Unfortunately for Jay, he would soon be dragged back in. To the Ark hacks into Jay's channel and uploads a threat saying To the Ark is coming for him. Jay decides to skip town entirely. Soon after that, Jay's previous apartment building is set on fire and he receives a package to his hotel room with a tape in it. This time, the tape isn't from years ago, it's from only a few days ago. In it, it shows Alex and his girlfriend Amy apparently living peacefully. But then, the operator attacks and a simple message: help. Knowing that Alex is alive and possibly in danger, Jay feels the need to find him. And that is the end of Season 1. So, a basic recap. Alex moves away after being haunted by the operator. Jay finds the tapes and begins being haunted by the operator himself. Brian is missing and now Alex is in danger. Meanwhile, To the Ark, a group of mysterious figures, at least one of which is Masky, is stalking Jay. Now, Jay has to find a way to save Alex. Season 2 picks up 7 months after Season 1. Jay wakes up in a new hotel, unsure of how he got there, and missing the last 7 months of his memory. He runs into a woman in the adjoining room, Jessica. The two have a few awkward encounters before Jessica confronts Jay about his strange behavior. It turns out neither of them remember the last 7 months. They decide to leave before anyone like Masky or the operator can find them, but before they can, Jessica goes missing and Masky attacks. Jay escapes along with a safe full of tapes that had been the footage of the last 7 months. And that is the main setup for Season 2. We're filling in the gaps of Jay's memory over the past 7 months. So now we're cutting back to what happened directly after the events of Season 1. Jay's first step after the end of Season 1 was to visit the return address on the package that arrived in his mail. Once there, Alex approaches him, but before they can talk, they encounter Masky.
Jay?
Alex and Jay are able to overpower him and unmask him, revealing that Masky is Tim. Although for eagle-eyed viewers, this wasn't a huge surprise. Masky's jacket is the exact same one that Tim is seen wearing in a tape before this. Alex seems to want to kill Tim, but Jay, in a real Better Call Saul Season 1 Episode 2 moment, is able to stop him short of breaking Tim's leg. Alex and Jay leave, and Alex is clearly a little unhinged. Alex also seems to inadvertently reveal a couple things. Number one, he's been watching the Marble Hornets channel for at least a little while, and he's the one that sent the package. Initially, with the way it was edited, it was assumed this was To the Ark who sent the package, but it seems that Alex was trying to get Jay to come to him. Alex and Jay work together in an attempt to find Amy, Alex's girlfriend who's gone missing since Alex and her were attacked. Alex seems shifty and uncooperative with Jay, and Jay ends up getting attacked by the operator at one point waiting for Alex. During this whole ordeal, we get a reveal of a new character aptly named by the community Hoodie, a second member of To the Ark who also seems to be hot on Jay and Alex's trail. During Jay and Alex's investigation, we learn that Jessica is actually Amy's roommate. Pieces are vaguely falling into place. However, Jay's distrust of Alex begins to mount, and Jay breaks into Alex's house. Alex catches him, but they're both caught by the operator. Jay gets away, but Alex stays behind. An interesting To the Ark entry occurs here that appears to be from a third member of To the Ark, not Masky or Hoodie, someone else we haven't seen yet. Some of this also begins to recontextualize exactly the purpose of the To the Ark channel. It also seems to be a way for its members to communicate with one another, and sometimes they don't always agree or get along. Specifically, we'll see it a lot later, Hoodie is often taunting Masky. Jay and Alex meet up sometime later. Jay is confused as to how Alex got away, but Alex decides that Jay can't be trusted now that he's snooping around. Jay attempts to trail Alex for a little while, but he misses this event. Alex kills a man in the Rosswood Park tunnel.
Oh hey, that's where I am.
Then the operator appears and seemingly takes his body for Alex, or perhaps Alex killed the man for the operator. Alex clearly isn't the victim Jay had initially thought. Unfortunately for Jay, he hasn't seen this happen yet. See, this footage was taken from a hard drive of Alex's that he found in the safe at the hotel, along with the tapes. This means Jay acquired this sometime in the future. Sorry, the timeline is a little confusing. This hard drive reveals a lot about Alex. We see Alex being attacked by Masky and Hoodie, probably not long after Alex and Jay unmask Masky as Tim. Unfortunately, the operator saves Alex and chases Masky and Hoodie away. We see Alex lying to Jessica about Amy's whereabouts and that his operator sickness is getting worse. I should probably emphasize the operator sickness a bit more. People who have prolonged exposure to the operator exhibit symptoms like loss of time and memory, insomnia, paranoia, and more physical symptoms like coughing fits, trouble breathing, coughing up blood, and things of that nature. Along with the visual and auditory distortions that occur when the operator is around in these tapes, some sort of coughing fit or related symptom are also usually present. I haven't had a chance to super emphasize this yet, but it's a very big part of what the operator does and how it affects the characters. This is likely the more extreme version of what some of the other actors were showing in earlier tapes in Season 1, and why Jay has lapses in memory during the production of Marble Hornets. The operator was lurking around even back then, and we get even more exposition about Alex's nefarious past. A tape from all the way back in the days of Marble Hornets' production shows Alex lure Brian to an abandoned hospital where the operator attacks him. Brian escapes and stumbles across Tim in this abandoned hospital in the middle of a coughing fit. However, before anything can happen, Alex attacks and drags Brian's body away. But again, Jay hasn't seen these tapes yet in the flashback 7 months ago timeline, he's only just seeing them now. So, right near the end of this 7 months flashback, Alex calls Jay and Jessica to show them something important. Both are worried about Amy's safety, so despite recent strange behavior, they follow Alex. It turns out that this is another classic Alex trick, and he pulls out a gun to kill Jessica and Jay. He's stopped by Maskey intervening, giving Jessica and Jay just enough time to escape. They go to a hotel room and put the tapes in a safe before the operator attacks. This operator attack is seemingly what wipes both of their memories. So we're finally back to the present, where Jay and Jessica first woke up in the beginning of the season. Now, Jay in the present, after learning all of this startling information, sees Tim going about his daily life, not masked up or anything. Insert COVID joke or something here. Jay plans to confront Tim, and that is the end of Season 2. Okay, recap. Jay goes to save Alex, believing Alex is in danger at the end of Season 1. Jay finds Alex, and the two of them unmask Maskey as Tim, and it's then revealed that Alex is in fact working in some way with the operator to kill off the members of the Marble Hornets cast. A new member of To the Ark is revealed, Hoodie. Jay and Jessica are lured by Alex to be killed, escape, but are attacked by the operator, wiping the past 7 months of their memories. Or, in a more concise summary, they forgore. There's also a few confusing things going on here with motivation from some of the characters. Is To the Ark helping Jay or working against him? And what is Alex's goal? Well, here's what it seems like to me. To the Ark has its own goal, to kill Alex and stop the operator, but mostly kill Alex. So sometimes that means helping Jay. But if Jay, for instance, wants to stop investigating and therefore stop revealing Alex's secrets, well, then they're going to work against Jay. Alex is a little more complicated. It seems like he wants to stop the spread of the operator by killing off everyone who's interacted with it. But at the same time, the operator is helping him. In my view, Alex has been haunted for too long by the operator for his own motivations to even be clear to him. He wants to kill off the people, and the operator is helping him do that, even if the reason he's going to kill them is supposedly to combat the operator. Also, it recontextualizes the entry where Alex leads Seth around the abandoned building in Season 1. Alex's end speech seems to be a cover-up to make himself look innocent. Alex brought Seth there on purpose to get him killed. Alright, got that? Season 2 alright? Let's move on to Season 3. Season 3 starts with Jay confronting Tim outside of what turns out to be Tim's mental health clinic. Jay quickly realizes that Tim has also had memory loss since the events of Season 2. Last thing Tim remembers about Jay is the interview all the way back in entry 15 of Season 1. So Jay continues with that story. He convinces Tim to help him continue working on Marble Hornets. Tim gives Jay some behind-the-scenes tapes from the production of Marble Hornets that Tim has not looked at, and shows Jay around a couple locations. These locations being the abandoned hospital that Alex attacked Brian in. The tapes Tim gave to Jay reveal that, much like Brian, Alex had at one point lured Tim out to the hospital and attacked him, leaving him to the operator. It's a fantastically spooky sequence. It appears this is not long before Brian found Tim after Alex attacked Brian. Tim seems nervous showing Jay around the hospital, but doesn't seem to remember anything from the tape about Alex. And in the tape where Alex attacks him, he seems just as anxious about being in the hospital, suggesting there's some connection to this place with Tim, which we will learn about later. Tim seems suspicious of Jay, and eventually decides he's done all he can do for Jay. But not long after, Tim asks to meet with Jay again. When they do, Tim is not happy.
Tim, listen, Student film you like, piece of...
He has found the Marble Hornets channel and not only found out that Jay has been lying about his intentions, but also has resurfaced memories about what Tim did as Maskey and such. Tim, however, is not at all interested in remembering, and is angry that Jay is roping him back into all of this after he was starting to get better. Apparently, Tim just woke up with large chunks of his memory missing after season 2, but was finally getting his life back together. He could hold a job, and his medication was helping to mitigate the worst effects of his mysterious illness. Tim leaves, telling Jay to
Stay out of my life!
Hoodie leads Jay to a maintenance tunnel where he finds a medical document regarding Tim. It shows that Tim has been experiencing symptoms of operator sickness since he was a child. To the Ark does not seem happy with Tim's decision to stop helping Jay. To the Ark uploads a video showing Hoodie breaking into Tim's apartment and stealing his medication. Tim has a coughing fit, but without his pills falls to the ground and has a seizure. When he gets up again, he seems dazed and confused. Jay is then attacked by Masky. It appears the pills are helping Tim stay away from the Masky state, and To the Ark is purposefully trying to induce this state into Tim, and it worked. After Masky's attack, both Jay and Tim, now no longer in the Masky state, wake up with no memories of how they got there. Reluctantly, they decide to continue working together. While exploring Rosswood Park, Tim and Jay are called by Alex.
Hello?
Leave. Now.
Then the operator attacks. Jay gets away, but we see Tim get ported around in his attempt to escape in an amazing sequence. In this sequence, we also see Tim get ported to a strange void with the body of the man Alex killed with a rock. This appears to be where the operator disappears Alex's victims to. After finally escaping, Tim wanders off to areas unknown for a while before coming back with no memory of where he went. Tim decides he needs to reveal something to Jay. He was a patient at the now abandoned mental hospital. This is why he was so reluctant to be there. He's been dealing with this operator sickness his whole life. He believes that the hallucinations he had may have actually been the operator, and that he might be the source of all of this. They are then interrupted by seeing Hoodie sneaking around the hospital. Following him, they find a tape he has hidden. Hoodie's hidden tape shows where Tim went in his missing memory after he and Jay were attacked at Rosswood Park. Hoodie and Tim kidnapped Alex and planned on killing him before they were interrupted by the operator. Although Tim isn't actually wearing the mask, it's safe to assume Tim is in the masky state here. Tim and Jay stop uploading for a while, hiding their whereabouts in fear of Alex finding them. Meanwhile, To the Ark, specifically Hoodie, are still scuffling with Alex as he tries to track Tim and Jay down. Tim and Jay resurface to show that they found more of Alex's tapes around the Red Tower. These new tapes reveal footage from all the way back when Jay had originally acquired the tapes from Alex before season 1, what Jay talked about in the introduction video. It shows that Alex had actually attacked Jay right after the handoff of the tapes. Jay, yet again, doesn't remember any of this. Much like Brian and Tim before him, Alex had tried to kill Jay off, but again, like those before him, failed at actually killing him. It appears to me that Alex rarely actually kills anyone he attacks. Instead, after incapacitating them, he leaves them for the operator to take. This has proven to be pretty ineffective so far, which is why I think in more recent Alex attacks, he's been using a gun or fully bashing someone's head in with a rock. He's got increasingly violent to make sure they don't come back. Looking for more answers, Tim and Jay go to Alex's old house, where they experience a time jump between night and day and are attacked by the operator. With the help of his medication, Tim is able to stand up to the operator and seemingly drive it off. However, Jay has no such luck and appears to be in a semi-permanent fog after the attack. Jay gives the login information for the YouTube and Twitter to Tim in case something happens to him. With the help of Tim's pills, Jay slightly begins recovering. To the Ark reveals to them that Alex is waiting to ambush them at Tim's house, as well as revealing that there is some tape in Tim's living room. When Tim and Jay arrive at the house hoping to get the jump on Alex, they find that he's gone, and a message from Hoodie leading them to an address of a college campus where Hoodie has apparently taken Alex. Tim and Jay decide to continue searching the house, and Jay is very preoccupied with finding the tape in Tim's living room, which is now missing from where it was when To the Ark had uploaded the video. Jay soon realizes that Tim has been lying about knowing where the tape is and is actually hiding it from Jay. Side note, Tim Sutton, the actor who plays Tim in the series, does a fantastic job at portraying someone who is lying. It's not over the top and almost convincing, like it really feels like someone who's lying and trying to shift the conversation away, but doing it in a believable way.
The tape that was in your living room, whoever's in the hood found it in that video, remember?
I'm a little more worried about Alex right now.
I'm not seeing anything. My door's open.
Huh?
I'm gonna go check the 2 rooms on the end. Will you check this one for me?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Jay attacks Tim and gets the tape from him before running away. Jay later uploads the contents of the tape. Okay, so for this tape to make sense, I'll have to remind you of some stuff that happened a little while ago. Remember when, at the beginning of season 2, when Jay and Jessica first started realizing things, Jessica went missing from the hotel? Well, this shows what happened to Jessica. Hoodie and Maskey kidnapped Jessica and brought her out to the woods, where Alex then chases Hoodie off. Thinking she's being saved by Alex, Jessica follows Alex to the Rosswood Tunnel, where he almost shoots her. Alex once again looking for more targets to kill off. Hoodie attacks Alex, giving Jessica just enough time to escape. Nope, this just isn't what happens. Jessica attacks Alex and gets the gun from him, and then Hoodie attacks Alex afterwards, and Jessica runs away. I really felt the need to correct this because Jessica is not like a damsel in distress character, and even though it seems like it a little bit in the actual main series, as we go on to more extended stuff, you'll definitely be able to see she is anything but. Anyway, just wanted to correct that.
No, shut up! Stay right there!
But she is unfortunately attacked by the operator. The final shot shows Jessica's body disappear, and Tim stumbles in, confused, taking off his mask. Presumably, this is him waking from his masky state with no memory. After seeing this tape, Jay goes back to Tim's house to attack Tim, but Tim easily overpowers him and ties him up.
Zip ties? Just want to talk? What were you gonna do?
Tim decides to go to the campus that Hoodie was leading them to alone. Hoodie then comes and frees Jay. Now, Jay and Tim explore the college campus where Alex was supposed to be held, avoiding each other. What happens next is a little confusing because it's revealed from different point of views at different times, so I'll try to explain this in order as best I can. While Jay explores the campus, he finds Alex, who apparently has escaped captivity by Hoodie, and is shot by Alex.
Alex?
He stumbles away, bleeds out, and he dies. Jay has been killed by Alex. Tim, however, after finding where Jay's body was, is teleported around by the operator as he's taunted by Hoodie. Tim is running out of pills, and Hoodie is the one who has extras. So while the both of them are being ported around to different locations by the operator, Tim chases Hoodie. Finally, Tim chases Hoodie to a ledge where he drops down, and now Hoodie's dead. Tim goes to his body and picks up a tape before being chased off by the operator. The tape on Hoodie's body is an audition tape for Marble Hornets, showing Brian and Tim audition for the first time. It's actually pretty sad watching it. Alex at this point is really just a struggling film student. Nothing horrible has happened yet. Something very important is revealed through this tape, however. Look at what Brian is wearing in this tape. That hoodie. And later reinforced by what Tim says, we finally know whose identity Hoodie is. It was Brian. Like Tim and Jay, Brian also survived Alex's attack and has been working to kill Alex as Hoodie since then until, well, you know. Tim waits at his house for Alex to show up in a very Western-feeling sequence. Finally, Alex does show up and burns his house down. He tells Tim that if he actually makes it out alive, to meet for a final showdown, essentially, at the college campus.
And it's not gonna end until you're dead!
Tim shows up to the college campus in an amazing final boss showdown. This sequence is one of the best in the series. The porting around, the lines, the stakes, everything is amazing. And once again, I am asking you to watch Marble Hornets yourself because you really do not want to miss out on this final confrontation. This final Alex boss fight ends with Tim stabbing and killing Alex before limping away and falling unconscious. The final tape shows Tim and Jessica meeting up. Wait, Jessica is alive? I'll explain that later. Tim and Jessica talk for a little bit, as it seems that Tim has got Jessica hooked up with the same doctor he had, managing the operator's sickness with pills. He also tells her he's going to be leaving town before having a coughing fit. Then we cut to Tim in his car with a police or ambulance siren softly in the distance. He comes to a crossroads and everything is fine. The end. Holy shit. What? There's a lot of questions, and I won't be able to answer all of them, but let's quickly recap. Not just on the season, but the story as a whole. Let's talk about what happened in chronological order. Tim's whole life he's been plagued by the operator, but through medication, he's been able to manage it. Unfortunately, on the set of the student film Marble Hornets, he accidentally spreads it to the cast and crew, Alex, Jay, and his best friend Brian. Alex, under the influence of the operator, begins trying to kill off everyone related to Marble Hornets, hoping it will stop the operator. To the Ark, a mysterious conglomerate that will eventually include Brian as Hoodie and Tim as Maskey, begins documenting and following this. Brian becomes Hoodie after being attacked by Alex, and after Alex fails to kill Jay, he moves to live with his girlfriend Amy. Jay begins the Marble Hornets YouTube channel and starts getting involved yet again. After Jessica and Jay are almost killed by Alex, they lose their memory after being attacked by the operator. Tim and Jay team up to put a stop to this, which leads to Jay's death at the hands of Alex, and Tim finally killing Alex. Jessica and Tim are presumably still alive, working to stave off the operator for as long as they can. So that's basically what happens, kinda? So let's answer some questions about Season 3. What happened with Jessica? It seems like she was taken by the operator and suddenly she's back at the end. Well, I don't think Jessica actually ever was taken by the operator. A popular theory is that Tim actually edited this footage. We never actually see the operator show up right before she disappears, unlike what happens with everybody else. The idea is, in order to protect Jessica from Alex, and Jay, as his snooping might bring Jessica back into danger anyway, Tim essentially faked her death to keep people off her trail while she stayed in hiding. There are a ton of other questions we get into, but many of them tie into the series as a whole and not just Season 3, so let's finally move on from Season 3 and get a little further into analysis with some questions. Who is To the Ark? There have been plenty of theories as to what the answer to this question is. As I've established, To the Ark has videos made by Hoodie, Maskey, and a mysterious third party who seems to be running things behind the scenes. To the Ark's references to rain, water, and of course Noah's Ark have led some to believe that it's the cameraman Seth. I haven't talked much about his character, but he is often associated with rain or water. And much like how Brian became Hoodie after being attacked by Alex, it might have been that Seth became To the Ark after being attacked by Alex. Even then, this is more symbolic than direct evidence. Honestly, my best guess is that it's someone we haven't seen. I take this stance because of something Joseph Delage said in a live stream. When asked about To the Ark being Seth, he said that he doesn't like the idea that every character that shows up on screen must be integral to the plot. What that says to me is, even if Seth was at some point in their mind to be To the Ark, who exactly To the Ark isn't as important and is left open on purpose, because there isn't a true answer. Remember, this is found footage, and we're seeing the story through the eyes of a few different people who don't have all of the information. So there's always going to be questions we can't answer because we are only seeing a sliver of the information. What is up with Hoodie and Maskey? We've touched on them before, but seriously, what's going on with them? Now that we know Brian was Hoodie and Maskey was Tim, what was their relationship? As many people have pointed out before me, Tim and Brian seem to have been really great friends in the past, in fact closer than probably anybody else in the production of Marble Hornets. So why is Hoodie so antagonistic to Tim so much of the time? Well, along with his altered mental state by the prolonged exposure to the operator, it's likely that Hoodie is under the same impression that Tim is the source of the operator. So while yes, they were friends, Brian holds a grudge against him for having spread the operator sickness to everyone, and by proxy, starting the entire path that led to where he is now as Hoodie. It's also important to note that they are not proxies of the operator. It seems that while the operator does have an effect on people around him, he doesn't necessarily mind control them to do what he wants. Alex is trying to stop the operator despite being the closest thing to a proxy by working with the operator directly. I've also heard some theories that Maskey wasn't actually a product of operator sickness originally, but due to some comments by the creators and some live streams I've seen more recently, it seems to me that the Maskey state is almost always a direct cause of the operator. To clarify, because I don't think I did a super great job at explaining it, I'm not saying Maskey and Hoodie's actions are motivated by what the operator wants. I just think operator sickness causes you to sort of lose your mind, and so the operator's just sort of creating chaos in their lives. What is operator sickness? The operator is a confusing and never fully explained entity. In fact, the characters in Marble Hornets rarely ever actually mention him, and when they do, it's with vague statements. In my view, the operator sickness effects have two possible connotations that they're related to. Firstly, what comes to mind is the effects of radiation. While probably not supposed to be directly like nuclear radiation or something like that, the fear associated with being this invisible force that slowly deteriorates your health seems like a very possible explanation to the operator's sickness. The other possible inspiration, I believe Nightmind is the first one who brought this to my attention, is that much of the symptoms also appear to be related to drowning, which would tie into the theme of Noah's Ark and the imagery of water in much of the series. On the topic of the operator though, let's talk about Tim. Was he the source? Honestly, I don't think so. See, again, in a more recent live stream by Joseph Delage, one of the writers of Marble Hornets, someone asked, is the operator evil? And Joseph Delage responded, not in the typical sense, more that the operator is a force of nature. To me, that signals that it isn't something that Tim created, and instead it shows him as a host or target, but it's something that's always been around in one form or another. At least that's my interpretation of it. Now, my next most obvious question to ask is, what happened at the end of the series? What happened to Jessica? What happened to Tim? What were the sirens in the background? And a few years ago, I could have given any number of personal interpretations because that was just the end. But more recently, as of 2019, a comic series has started about the story of Marble Hornets. When I first heard about it, I figured it would be either a retelling of the series or be some loosely connected non-canon work. But that is not the case. The Marble Hornets comic is a direct continuation of the story from this point. I'll be getting into that, but a little bit later. We still have a lot of ground to cover before we get there.
So let's take a pause from answering questions for now, and just look at some themes and more general things that Marble Hornets explores.
First, I just wanted to mention that Marble Hornets does a wonderful job at self-critique or meta-commentary. From Tim's character in the Marble Hornets student film description mirroring what Tim's actual character in the series would be like.
The kind of guy that always has a cigarette in his mouth and maybe some sort of facial hair like mustache or sideburns, something like that.
To Brian's comment, it's not distracting, but subtly placed little lines like that make a second watch more enjoyable. So, the big thing to talk about here with the themes of Marble Hornets is perception. I think that encapsulates a lot of what they touch on in the series. Memory, mental health, trust are constantly brought up, hammered home, reestablished, and recontextualized over and over again. Jay as a narrator is very unreliable. He doesn't know about Alex's true intentions, he doesn't remember many of the things that have happened to him both before the start of the series and after. His own character flaws inform what he includes, what he excludes, and his decisions to do things like snoop around, which end up playing with trust. Because of all the uncertainty throughout the series about someone's intentions and what they might be, people are constantly set back on their own goals because of their trust for one another. Jay's trust of Alex, Tim's trust of Jay, and then later Jay's trust of Tim. Each one of these conflicts presents a new setback in the characters and recontextualizes how each one interacts with one another. And memory plays into all of this. New information is gained and lost all the times, things that people don't remember they learn about again, and large experiences that would change people's perception of each other are completely forgotten. Jay's trust of Alex, despite Alex having tried to kill him before the Marble Hornets channel was even started, is because Jay's memory lost over the production of Marble Hornets. Tim's trust of Jay when Jay is lying to him comes because of Tim's memory loss, and Jessica's distrust of Jay in the hotel comes because she doesn't remember what they all went through over the past 7 months. Similarly to Jay, when Jessica is kidnapped by Masky and Hoodie and then, in quotes, saved by Alex, she doesn't know not to trust Alex because of her own memory loss. Everything that happens in these characters' worlds and what we learn about them through them happens with incomplete and scattered memories, which is why questions like who 2 the ARC is may never be answered, because people and memories and events come in and out of knowledge of any single person all the time. And then there's all the things that they know in the context of their relationships and experiences that they don't share, because they don't see how it could be relevant because of their own biases. Everything we see in the series is filtered through the lens of the person and then through the lens of what that person wants the audience to know. So we're seeing a fraction of what's really going on, which is mirroring the experience of the characters who are also only seeing a fraction of what's going on in their own lives. It's very well done. I also want to touch on the note of mental health, which is a theme that is brought up a lot. While you could see the operator sickness as a stand-in for fears like drowning or radiation, its effects on the characters mentally and emotionally seem a lot closer to the effects of mental illness. It's not a perfect portrayal by any means, and definitely requires some suspension of disbelief to fully accept operator sickness as being a stand-in for mental health. But I think this interpretation does have merit. Not in an M. Night Shyamalan Split type of way, but in a slightly hopeful view of the struggle with mental illness. It might be hard and things might never be perfect, but with the correct help and dedication, it can be managed and made a lot better. Some interpretations of the ending of Marble Hornets suggest that Tim kills Jessica at the end, and then Tim kills himself to finally get rid of the operator. I don't like these interpretations very much because it essentially concludes that there's nothing that can be done, and it's hopeless, and it can't be managed. But that last shot of the crossroads to me symbolizes that people have a choice. They can always choose to keep going, to forge ahead, and learn to live better lives even with whatever they're struggling with. Okay, outside of the sentimental themes, before we move on to talking about the aftermath of the series release, I want to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff we've learned about over the years, focusing more on the production. I really like digging into some of these sorts of things, so I just want to mention a couple things. First, that last shot of the crossroads that I talked about symbolizing and working into the themes, that was by luck. Originally, it was just supposed to be Tim driving and the camera's facing him. But then Tim saw the crossroads and was like, wow, this is a perfect end shot. Flips it over, and apparently, off camera, everybody else in the car who was part of the production team were like freaking out with how perfect that was. Okay, I also want to talk about a little less specific things like what about the camera and what was the operator costume made with, which we will talk about, but I first want to touch on what the Marble Hornets crew was actually able to pull off more generally. It is in my view that Marble Hornets elevated the format of found footage to something more cinematic than almost anything had done before, and projects continue to struggle with. And one of the biggest reasons, I think, is because it doesn't feel cinematic. It doesn't feel like a film. So every time they do something crazy, it feels so much more real and impactful. The teleportation chase sequences hit harder, the emotional breakdowns, the little views of the operator we get. Shots like this or this feel organic, and yet they have an incredibly cinematic quality to them. And as the series went on, this only increased. Alex lighting Tim's house on fire is such an amazing shot and is elevated so much by the fact that things seem so real, and you know the budget in this was a fraction of even a TV movie budget. So it just hits. Or the montage sequence of Tim waiting for Alex. The outfit, the atmosphere, it feels like a Western waiting for the final showdown. That banjo while he stares out the window, I mean, come on. But it feels really impactful because you spent all this time with Tim, and the whole thing is presented as real. Aside from some stilted acting at times, Marble Hornets does almost everything right, and that's not even mentioning the fact that it managed to dodge plenty of cliches in writing that would have been very easy to fall into. Okay, on to the more details of the actual production. Something that over the years the production team behind Marble Hornets have dodged and weaved around revealing for a long time. How did they make the operator? One thing they've mentioned before is that it's not a puppet or a statue, it is a costume. Now, for like a decade, they hid exactly how they made that costume. Not because they didn't want to reveal their amazing secret recipe, but because it was apparently so lame that it would ruin it. Well, prepare to be ruined. Just kidding, it really didn't ruin it. Now, I assume the costume changed over time, so things aren't quite consistent, but in a live stream by Joseph Delage on the 10th anniversary of Marble Hornets, he revealed a few things. The no face was pantyhose. The height? Well, it changed eventually, but in the beginning it was literally them standing on a bunch of flip-flops that had been taped together. But obviously that changed later. My best guess for how that changed is stilts, especially considering this video of some of the Marble Hornets guys working with stilts. It was post Marble Hornets, and it's possible this isn't how they did it, but there are a few things they say that suggest to me that they eventually upgraded from those flip-flops.
You have the benefit of the ceiling, we didn't.
Yeah, we were like outside.
So there you go, the big mystery partially revealed. Now, what about locations? Some people online have actually made a pretty comprehensive lists of where they filmed most scenes. Almost the entirety of the series was filmed in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, taking advantage of actual abandoned buildings in their area, most of which, aside from the college campus, they didn't have permission for. They actually had a great variety of locations, and because of how big they were, it added to the sense of scale. Some of the locations aren't there anymore, but quite a few you can still actually go and see yourself pretty easily. So easily, in fact, that during the shooting of later seasons, they had issues with people graffitiing locations they needed to reuse with in-jokes or over-the-top references that make it difficult to get certain shots. Now, here's something interesting. The camcorder they used for all 5 years of Marble Hornets doesn't actually use tapes. So how did they get the distortion, the glitches, the sounds? Well, it's actually very interesting. For the video and audio distortions, they used a terrible old freeware version of Sony Vegas. I'm actually using Sony Vegas to edit this video right now, but in a much newer version. The thing is, the version they used was so janky and buggy that they purposefully exploited its rendering issues and breaking the program itself to get the effects they needed. For audio, though, there was another supplementary tool they used, circuit bending. Tim Sutton, who played Tim in the series, recorded sounds of bent, broken, manipulated, and torn apart electronics to create some of their sounds. I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, last little rapid-fire fun fact round. There are no swears in Marble Hornets. Many times, different actors played different characters if they were wearing a mask or behind the camera. And there are lots of scenes where the dialogue is either improv or actually them just talking out of character that they kept in because it fit. Oh, and originally the ending for season 1 sounded pretty damn cool.
Jay, the operator, finds him now, hops in the car or whatever, turns on the car and headlights, bam, operator right there. Starts driving. We had this country road that always fogged up at night. So as we were going down there, there are these light poles. We were going to have the operator under each one using camera trickery and stuff like that. And then that was going to be the end.
So, the legacy of Marble Hornets. What can one web series really do? Well, it turns out a lot, and there are uncountable ways that Marble Hornets has changed independent filmmaking, found footage, analog horror, horror online. But to start, let's talk about how Marble Hornets changed Slenderman.
Slenderman, as we know him today, can almost entirely be owed to Marble Hornets. Now, obviously, credit to the actual creator, Victor Surge, but so many of the iconic parts about the Slenderman was directly inspired by Marble Hornets' operator, besides the main look, association with child victims, and tentacles. The camera glitches, the pages, proxies, although Marble Hornets doesn't really have any true proxies. It's definitely inspired the trope, though. Teleporting, hell, the first entire Slender game. Some of the most iconic parts of the Slenderman character in general as an urban myth were spawned by Marble Hornets, and that alone has changed so much. But that's not even the half of it. It has changed so many of the formats of media in the horror genre that it's honestly incredible. Let's start with games. Now, I've talked at length about the Slender games before, so I won't linger here for too long. Here, check this video out if you want some more. But there are some important things to mention about the Slender games. Slender the 8 Pages, honestly, is more of a Marble Hornets game than purely a Slenderman game. The whole game, aside from the tentacles, follows almost exclusively the Marble Hornets lore around the operator and environment. The pages are directly from Alex Crayley's drawings we see throughout Marble Hornets, the use of the camera static. Hell, almost every single location or landmark in the woods is inspired by locations from Marble Hornets, from the tunnel to the tower. I think it's more than fair to say that without Marble Hornets, there wouldn't be Slender the 8 Pages. And, well, I've talked all about how Slender completely changed the course of indie horror before, so of course, by proxy, Marble Hornets completely changed the course of indie horror. Credit where credit is due, Parsec Productions adapted these things into a new format extremely well and created one of the last viral sensations, but you can't deny Marble Hornets' influence. Speaking of Parsec Productions, Slender the Arrival, the official sequel to Slender the 8 Pages. When looking to expand on the story aspect in the sequel, it was an obvious choice who to reach out to. Marble Hornets wasn't even finished yet, but it was clear what the team behind it could do. So much of the actual story of Slender the Arrival was written by the THAC guys. Troy Has a Camera, the eventual production name for the Marble Hornets crew that is no longer still together. Unfortunately, it seems like much of their vision of the game didn't get fully used, and the production team of the game just used bits and pieces to fit into parts of the games they had already developed. But you can definitely see the story parallels between Marble Hornets and The Arrival, and I think the game benefited from their story input. The last thing I want to talk about is the other web series that have spawned out of Marble Hornets or been inspired by Marble Hornets. First, the official sequels to Marble Hornets. Not too long after Marble Hornets finished, THAC started work on Clear Lakes 44. Not a true sequel to Marble Hornets, but taking place in the same universe, and originally uploaded on the same Marble Hornets channel. However, after THAC dissolved, the series was cancelled, and Troy Wagner, the main writer and creator of Marble Hornets, started a new series called ECVA. Similar to Clear Lakes 44, it existed in the same universe as Marble Hornets, and follows the investigation of a mysterious broadcast network, ECVANet, incorporating aspects of analog horror and animation. So if you're looking for more from the creators of Marble Hornets, there you go. Outside of official sequels, Marble Hornets spawned an entire genre, which the community calls the Slenderverse. These are web series many times in the style of Marble Hornets that incorporate the Slenderman character and at times other creepypasta or urban legend characters. Much like the SCP universe, these series can both exist in a vacuum of their own canon or incorporate the canons of other popular Slenderverse creations. The two biggest ones that come to mind are Everyman Hybrid and Tribe 12. They are a whole can of worms themselves, but I figure I should briefly mention them. Minor spoilers ahead. Everyman Hybrid has a great premise, in my opinion. A group of friends begin making videos faking Slenderman's presence in the background, before quickly realizing that Slenderman and other various internet mythos characters are actually stalking them. Tribe 12 shows someone named Noah's channel, in dedication to their recently deceased cousin Milo, turns slowly into an investigation around Milo's death, as supernatural entities and strange incidents are slowly discovered around his death. If you're hankering for more Slenderverse content after Marble Hornets, go check those out. Last thing I want to mention here is how much Marble Hornets has inspired what is probably the most popular current web series format, analog horror. 2D Ark's artsy, spooky video style wasn't necessarily completely unique. Look at any hoax, spooky deep web video. But if you look at a lot of the popular analog horror creators nowadays, they mark Marble Hornets as a big inspiration. Martin Walls of the Walton Files, Alex Kister of the Mandela Catalog. The style of codes, the distorted videos, heck, even the spooky distorted faces. Marble Hornets may not have been the first, but it certainly did all of these things very well in a way that stuck with the next generation of creators.
So, Marble Hornets' legacy is better than most creators could ever hope for their projects, but it's not all good. See, Marble Hornets told its story in a way that was uniquely suited to the internet. So when people started to want to turn it into a mainstream, low-budget feature film in 2015, well, I'm sure you can see that things wouldn't go perfectly smoothly, especially when you look at the failure that was the 2020 Slender Man. So let's talk about Always Watching, a Marble Hornet story. So, Always Watching, Marble Hornet story. I think I first heard about this not too long after it came out, maybe with the Nightmind review of it. He said it was so bad to not even watch it at all, not even for the bit. So of course, I went and watched it.
The thing about Always Watching is that it isn't really a Marble Hornets movie. While the production company got the rights and worked vaguely with the creators of Marble Hornets to use the name and the cred of the series, it wasn't written by any of the Marble Hornets guys, and they're not really involved in it at all. It doesn't really look like a Marble Hornets movie either. When you think Marble Hornets, you think a dusty camcorder glitching out, and dark figures just barely in the background of compressed footage. It made the whole thing look scarier and more real. Always Watching has paranormal activity syndrome. Everything is film quality. The whole movie looks like it was filmed on an Epic X Red Dragon Pro, which is a camera, and not an item from baddragon.com, I swear. However, one thing is pretty promising. They got Doug Jones, creature actor extraordinaire, who's worked on the likes of Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, and The Bye-Bye Man. That last one is closer to the quality we're getting with this movie. Okay, let's talk about the pros first. I promise this part will be quick. There are a couple ideas for shots that are pretty cool in this very early on. For instance, there are a couple scenes that to me really evoke some of the original Slender Man images that Victor Surge created. They're not perfectly executed, but I like the idea of putting some of these images to film. There's also a couple effective ideas that are thrown in there, like for instance having a Halloween decoration look kind of like Slender Man. While the execution of this shot made me laugh more than be scared, it was clever. Aside from that, I can't really say anything nice about the film. The cons are too many to count, but let's go over a few. There is no subtlety to Slender Man's appearances. He is almost always quite obviously there, and looks goofy much of the time. He's just standing there like, Oh, they're taking a picture. No, I'll wait. Slender Man's powers don't really make any sense and are often ridiculous. Why does Slender Man brand you? Why can he make people into zombies? Why can he only be seen through a camera? These aren't things Slender Man really does, let alone Marble Hornets' operator. Why does he have a big gray alien head? The characters are incredibly unlikable, and their behavior ranges from dickish to creepy to just plain weird.
Sarah, listen, no, Charlie, don't touch my camera, Charlie. Don't nuts.
I don't want to get physical, but I'm
Okay, no, get your hands off.
Dude comes in having a psychotic break, and this guy goes, I am going to punch you. Like, what? I literally could not care less if any of these people died. In Marble Hornets, the characters were flawed, but you certainly didn't want them to die. They were all likable in some way, despite sometimes being foolish or snoopy. In this movie, they're all just assholes all of the time. Many shots that are meant to be scary just look funny. And there are tons of missed opportunities to make something scary happen. The whole movie just sort of rushes to the end. It's got that terrible person in a movie using a computer look a few times, and aside from little issues of the movie just being not very good, it also feeds into a very tired and harmful cliche of characters with mental health issues. The spooky crazy person in mental asylum that is scary and dangerous. While Marble Hornets isn't perfect, it was a much more realistic and nuanced portrayal than this, which once again just reinforces people with mental health issues are scary. Not so great. All in all, I was scared 3 times while watching this movie, and all of them were because of people I was watching with kept making extremely loud sounds into the mic very suddenly.
So yeah, all in all, the movie was not great. To me, it was one of the first nails in the Slender Man character coffin, and it really showed that mainstream media just can't get a lot of online things correct. But yeah, we're almost done talking about Marble Hornets here. I only have one more thing to talk about: the comics. So, the comics. After THAC, Troy Has a Camera, dissolved, Troy Wagner was pretty much the one who continued the Marble Hornets story. First with ECVA, and then now with the comics. Now, I'll be honest, the series isn't finished yet. The comics aren't finished yet, so it would be kind of weird to analyze everything too much because, well, we don't have all the information yet. But I do want to talk about it a little bit, so here we go.
Written by Troy Wagner, art by Jackie Reynolds, and the first issue's cover art by Trevor Henderson, this promised to be a big project. And when the first issue was released in 2019, we'd see just how big it was. The art style is amazing and very cohesive. Unfortunately, I don't want to show much because I don't want to get into trouble. The comic is behind a paywall for a reason. If you're really interested, go pick up the comic yourself. Support the artists. I'll say this about it though. The backgrounds are amazing, its stylization is incredible, and there's clearly some inspiration from other great horror artists like Junji Ito. One of the coolest things we see are recreations of shots from Marble Hornets. I was very excited when I saw those. What's so fun about reading through this is that because there are much fewer restrictions on where they can go or what things look like through the comic format, we can see a lot more creative freedom and expression of what this world could look like. The visuals also utilize a really great use of photography and glitching, which ties to the aesthetic back to the original Marble Hornets web series really well. Now, story-wise, I'll talk a little more about. The comic follows Jessica a little while after the end of Marble Hornets, so the theory that Tim killed Jessica seems like it is not, in fact, canon. Jessica's memories of the whole ordeal are almost all gone after some head injury. I believe this could be what the sirens were in the final Marble Hornets entry. Maybe Tim did try to kill Jessica, or maybe she just broke down along with Tim. Or there was some sort of operator attack. Either way, we followed Jessica as she starts dealing with these memories coming back to her. At the same time, there are two amateur documentary filmmakers trying to make a film about Rosswood Park. See, in this universe, the Marble Hornets videos are well known. People just assumed that they were fake. Spoiler alert, they weren't. However, Rosswood Park is well known in the community for strange disappearances, so that's what these two filmmakers are working on. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of these two characters, but it does give an opportunity for the operator to be viewed through the lens of characters who haven't encountered it before, so that's fun. But here's where things get really great. A new masked figure shows up, stalking Jessica, bringing back these old memories, sending her the Marble Hornets videos. And this mask might be familiar to those who are very into Marble Hornets. This mask design was seen in To the Ark videos, but never panned out into anything. The creator said that it was originally going to be Jay's mask for if they ever wanted to give him a masky state, but they decided to abandon that idea. So now, it's back. This new masked figure, Scully, isn't an ordinary person and isn't really out to harm Jessica. It's a supernatural entity that appears to be made up of the operator's victims, or something like that. It is enlisting the help of Jessica to kill the operator. Hell of a task. That's the basic plot for now, but if you really want to get into the details, you'll have to go buy it and read it and support the artist. Overall, I really like the comic. The art, the story, they're even putting codes to be cracked in the comic. I like what they're doing with reincorporating stuff from the original series, from recreating shots to putting to use the Scully character, to looking at how the trauma of the original web series affects people today. There's a particularly cool sequence where Jessica has a vision of being back in the tunnel with Alex pointing a gun at her. Yeah, something like that would stick with you and probably be very traumatizing. It's very neat. Exactly where it's going from here, I don't know, but it does a great job of creating genuinely scary imagery, intriguing plot lines, and characters, except for, the two I don't care for. They're just kind of annoying. I don't know, it might just be a personal preference thing. Either way, I think if you like Marble Hornets, you should definitely try at least the first issue out. And honestly, even if this is you're hearing about Marble Hornets, the comic series is probably the most generally polished piece of official Marble Hornets media, and is definitely more accessible than the 9-hour web series. So yeah, go check it out.
And with the comic out of the way, that's pretty much all I have to say about Marble Hornets, aside from you should really go check it out yourself. It's a fantastic web series, and
that's the end of the tapes. And considering how the past few days have been, I don't think it's a good idea to go any deeper. So that's where I'm leaving it. I guess for those of you who enjoyed, subscribe, follow my Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, second channel. Yeah, just regular shoutouts. The music for this video should be on Spotify, and if it's not already, it should be soon. Yeah, so I'm ending this. That is the exact reason why I'm ending this. But yeah, thank you all for sticking with me. This is one of the biggest projects I've ever done, so I hope it was worth it in the end. And thank you to all of these people who helped a lot with the research of this process. All the people that are on screen right now. They were a tremendous help with the research part of this video, and I couldn't have done it without them. Yeah, I guess I'll see y'all next time.